Today I will explain why marriage is a completely useless and even harmful institution for men today. Let's start with the basics of biology. For clarification, the SMV chart discussed in episode 4 will be necessary, in a chart of attractiveness of both sexes depending on their age. If you haven't seen it, I encourage you to watch this episode for a better understanding of the problem. One of the functions of marriage, especially from the standpoint of stability of nations and even civilizations, is to limit the natural differences in reproductive strategies that derive directly from biology. Contrary to the opinions of prominent feminists, biology is not a social construction, and some differences derive directly from it. However, the level of loss of contact with reality is devastating. The institution of a stable and monogamous marriage has caused that, at a time when the attractiveness of a woman far exceeds that of her peers. Her ability to sleep with many men is in fact limited through the social condemnation of betrayal and slothfulness. This is an obvious cost, but in return, a woman receives the support of a man at a later stage when the maximum attractiveness is over, which is a situation of unrestricted freedom of his reproductive strategy, even if he did not look at it. A similar situation is in the case of men, with the difference that there is a time shift. That is, a man who is not yet at the peak of his attractiveness has the opportunity to access an unharmed woman, so this is an incentive and his profit. But this is at the expense of the fact that in the future, when he will outperform his peers in appeal, a monogamous marriage prevents him from taking advantage of the appeal in the marriage market and then from having the choice he can have. Beyond all spiritual, romantic, or even religious rationalizations, the necessity of a monogamous marriage, by removing it from this envelope and by looking only at rational prerequisites, it is clear that marriage is the most ordinary compromise. In this way, the different biological reproductive strategies of men and women have been reconciled. Both sides are sacrificing something, but both are also gaining something. Skipping arranged marriages between families, where politics plays a more important role. At the lowest level of two people, this is the main idea behind the introduction of the institution of marriage, not that it pleases God. Someone who introduced marriage into a religious, cultural, and social framework must have been perfectly aware of human nature and the impact it has on the stability and development of a community, a nation, or even a state. In ancient times, the number translated into the strength of a given country. In fact, it is still so today. Demography is important, which can be seen even after Social Security. In addition, it is known that for the proper development of a child, both parents are needed. And this is the second reason for giving the union of a man and a woman special privileges, religious and legal, which have become part of the culture over time. In this way, without translating the details, the biology was broken and the problem of the transactional nature of relationships was solved, and greater chances for the proper development of the offspring were ensured. Solipsism and hypergamy, as well as male reproductive strategy, have been chromed. There are, of course, other factors that affect the current deregulation of the marriage market. Security and the prosperity created by previous generations, which is just coming to an end. So it is possible that there will be no money to finance such nonsense. But this is a different topic. Now that we know what the institution of marriage really is, I can tell you why, in the current environment, mostly legal but also social, there is not the slightest chance that I will get married. Firstly, divorce in the Western world puts a woman in a privileged position, which causes the temptation to take advantage of this state of affairs. By a strange blow, feminists who are fighting for alleged equality will not even see a word about the sharp disparity, for example in determining alimony and with whom the child remains after a divorce. Well, it's really interesting. In earlier generations where the true faith reinforced by religion and customs was stronger, spouses tried, or even were forced, to solve their problems. Today, enough is a mythical character difference, an accusation of violence, and basically, it's over you. As we know, breaking an oath is very easy. There is a cult of one time rather than work on the relationship. In 2018, about 70% of divorces were initiated by women. Assuming you didn't know the rules of the game and you were a nice guest, the chance that your marriage would break up was 40%, and in most cases it was not a man who initiated this divorce. Think about this probability from a different perspective. If you go to a happy town because you want to have a good time, and the service before entering informs you that the probability of a potentially dangerous accident is 40%, will you decide to do so? Another example. Suppose you have a risky nature and you like extreme sports. Would you jump with a parachute if you knew that in almost half of the cases the parachutes don't open, which threatens death or illness? And that's the likelihood of divorce in big cities. If you live in the countryside, the risk is halved and is around 20%. The average marriage length is 14 years, and the chances of divorce are highest for marriages with less than 10 years of experience. For me, the above-mentioned actual statistics are enough to bypass contemporary marriage with a broad arc. especially because I do not see any exclusive and substantial benefit that I could not be staying free. Being in a relationship does not require marriage. Having children does not require marriage. Even a child can bear your last name, and it does not need marriage. Remember, marriage formalizing relationships and allowing the state apparatus to enter it increases the safety, mainly social, of women. And it's done at the expense of a man. Therefore, ladies will be willing to get married because it is in their vital interests. So don't be surprised when you hear the whole festival of ridicule when you declare that you're not in favor of formal marriages. You'll find out what this mythical true love is, and if there's any hidden interest you don't have any idea about. If you can count on and understand how loosening social norms has released egocentric and sometimes narcissistic female solipsism, then you will understand that for a large number of modern girls, a man is only a tool to obtain their goals free of charge. Not all, but you will find that a very large amount. You will learn that after a huge reluctance to accept such a position. Then you'll hear that you haven't grown up, that you're not a real man, and other nonsense about Peter Pan and so on. While it is exactly the opposite. If you are conscious, then unwillingness to marry is a sign of wisdom, caution, and guarding your important affairs. So to such manipulative arguments, I'm only answering that a real woman would understand. The absence of marriage causes that if, even after a few or a dozen years, you manage to accumulate some resources, and at the same time you know that you will not be able to get rich from it, then firstly, its calculation changes. Because if she's a manipulator, she won't be able to steal you. And secondly, that's what makes you use the knowledge, and you're not at the mercy of her caprices. You simply do not close your way to a possible evacuation in a really troubled situation. And we know that the demo period can be misleading, and a woman is a variable. When other methods fail, you say goodbye. You get up and go out, or you point out where the door is. Thanks to this, the most ordinary balance is signed during the eventual termination of the relationship. Because just as a woman can end a relationship without consequences, so can you. If you even get used to this person, after a while, you'll heal the wounds. In this way, I will see if the potential partner is interested in me or what I can offer. I know game theory, and I understand this calculation. For what reason should a woman leave me if I am an embraced man? In addition, she will not have any benefits from this, for example, financial. From experience, I can say that this can greatly strengthen the relationship. A thoughtful and predictive man who is able to imagine the consequences of a divorce in a situation where he earns the proverbial national average will have a big dilemma if his spouse tells him that on the occasion of the divorce, he will only let him in socks. And such blackmail is nothing extraordinary and unusual. Of course, not always, but I prefer to limit the risk. As I say, minimize risk, maximize chance. I learned this pragmatism from women. In addition, if you have no experience or even psychopathic traits, the vision of losing a roof over your head can very effectively shake your frame. Manipulates and damaged goods will not have scruples with the use of a dominant position. That's why I said divorcees would often tell you that the woman they were married to and the one they were divorced from was not the same person. I will give two extreme examples here, but they both show the same mechanism. Maximize profit. First, two young people. The marriage very quickly turned out to be a total mistake, and since there were neither children nor earned property, the divorce was a formality and lasted 20 minutes. There was nothing to argue about, property and children, and the spouses wanted to agree to settle the matter as soon as possible and go on their way. There was no conflict of interest, so there was no problem. The second, adult people are already very middle-aged. They got married, and in the meantime, the husband bought a recreational property from his premarital savings. But since he had no separation of property, in the divorce it turned out that half belonged to his ex-wife in a moment. The fact that she did not add $1 at the time of the purchase was no obstacle to demanding the repayment of her share. This man was an old date. He counted on the honorable behavior of his wife. He's been counting, and he lost less than $200,000. He believed so much that love was the most important thing. He's already healed. He proved in a costly way that the world has changed. That's why you need to know. As a matter of curiosity, I will only say that after the divorce, his father-in-law, in the tide of honesty, it was said that our hero was the third husband, and he did not have an idea about it. He lived in the belief that he was second. The ex-wife probably forgot to tell him. It's such a little detail. I can imagine this astonished minute when this good news reached his ears. Does she think that such information could affect her decision to get married? That is why a woman's past is so important. These are the rules of the game. The second reason why I'm not getting married is more psychological and related to knowing the rules of the game. We know that people, and women in particular, respect power. In a red pill context, power can mean many things, including independence. The biological goal of a woman is, of course, to secure herself. The problem is that most of the time this security is at the expense of men. I know, I understand. In theory, you should get something in return for your sacrifice, even a basic thing like respect. But don't have any illusions. Especially if you show only a serviceful and submissive stance of the foot. By setting yourself in the herd hierarchy in the beta position, you won't even get that. I've seen and heard too much to pretend it's different. I'm talking about it because most of the nice guests think it's normal, and that's what their marriage should look like. So that a woman doesn't respect them. I have only 2 words for this attitude. Respect yourself. I'm reminding you that sex is just an incentive to get into a relationship and then work on it all. I'm sorry, but a lot of modern girls reason in these terms. In some simplification, it seems that the moment a woman feels confident, emotions disappear, boredom appears, and nature automatically turns off the excitement. And this is happening beyond the consciousness and control of a woman. If you turn out to be weaker, you just stop feeling it. Hypergamy is ruthless, and never forget it. If there are no other benefits, changing branches is usually only a matter of time. It's a repetitive pattern, just like the seasons. That's why you have no choice. If you want a stable relationship, you have to be strong. At the biological level, there are no exceptions. Only the education or self-awareness of a potential woman can prevent this. I don't count on the latter at all because I know the power that the primary brain has. I've seen it too many times to still believe in fairy tales. That is precisely the paradox. When a woman gains security by subordinating herself to a man on a subconscious level, she begins to feel better. When she starts to feel better, she stops respecting. When he stops respecting, he starts to get a headache, which is an obvious sign of a lack of excitement. These are the rules of the game. It's hypergamy in its pure form. When you take the balls out of the jar, miracles begin to happen. Therefore, communicating your rules and boundaries, I propose to practice from the beginning of acquaintance. There will be fewer disappointments. If you're not afraid to lose access to sex, it's going to be a lot easier than you think. But you'll only understand this when you have more experience with women. So what does it mean that a man is not allowed to marry? And it's just that he doesn't give up his independence. If a woman promises a man to continue a relationship with him in the future, in exchange for the benefits obtained from him today, then her promise becomes void with the transfer of the promised benefit. And that's why the sacramental yes so easy erases everything that was promised to you before the wedding. And among other things, that's why a woman is changing, especially if you're not her best hypergamy choice. And especially if your leg's going to fold. If he finds you weak, there will be no pity for you. This is the biological default setting of a woman. Women who have been raised in traditional values will be less prone to such behavior. But do not forget that propaganda always inserts in the minds of modern women rules far from traditional. At this point, some of you may notice that this approach will be unacceptable to many women at present. Of course, this is a conflict of interest. This dilemma was solved by the institution of marriage that worked effectively in society, and few people realized it at all. At present, you will have to solve this problem on your own, and therefore you need to know. In addition, an outbreak of hyperglycemia will cause some part of women, in my opinion, to believe that they deserve someone better. Someone like the character in 50 Shades of Grey. At least until we meet the wall, but that's good. Because if your goal is a long relationship, this is how you're sowing women who, in the long run, will make your life a drama, and thus you'll avoid falling into a trap. You can say that this is one of the thicker male shit tests that can be applied. The other side of the coin in my approach is that it won't work for men who aren't embraced. Conducting the maneuver under the title "I will not marry" requires the applicant's experience and a strong sense of self-worth, and adhering to his rules and framework, as well as not being afraid of loneliness. To understand that a woman cannot give him happiness, that he does not have a sense of inner emptiness, which he will want to fill with the relationship. It's a trap, and a way to nowhere, because in exchange for that pleasure that the bedroom can give, a man without rules will be let down when the demo period is over and the game starts and the migraines appear. A weak man will not be able to set his limits because it can mean a breakup that he fears or does not want, most often because it will lose, and so questionable quality access to the bedroom. Know that in today's times, women, due to the ubiquitous slicking of men and the constant need for attention, are equally unable to cope with rejection by reliable boys. It is hard for them to understand how it is possible that a man, especially the one they consider to be weaker, can thank them for their cooperation because it does not meet his standards. Don't ever forget that. You have something to say in a relationship. In the work of Robert Trivers on the theory of parental investment, the following sentence is written: The sex that bears higher costs of parenting will be more selective in choosing a partner. When you consider the progress of modern prenatal care, which drastically reduces the health costs of parenting for women, and when you take into account the male side of the costs, you will inevitably come to the conclusion that at present, the costs are far greater for men. And since you know that, the only rational solution is to be selective and not to get stuck in this trap with high exit costs, because that equals the chance in a gynocentric legal system. To sum up, the main reason nobody's going to force me to get married these days is my reluctance to put myself in a very disadvantaged position at the start. Knowing that I have a 40% chance of getting a divorce and assuming I'll do everything perfectly, just as I need to without making mistakes, is definitely too risky for me. Knowing the uncontrolled nature of women at the moment, I'm aware that behavior may change over time. For example, as a result of empty nest syndrome. Ladies and gentlemen always want to have the last word and pragmatically reserve the opportunity to change their minds in any situation. If he doesn't get married, he equals his chances, leaving for itself the same possibility, which causes it to operate then with the same level of independence. Once it was unthinkable, today I consider it a sad necessity. This is all the more because you are so eager for basic equality. As long as it's good, it is good. But if something happens that I can't control, I don't want to be in trouble. The risk of divorce is diametrically lower when you marry a virgin. But in order to find one, you'd have to start looking for it in elementary school, and it's already illegal, so this option is more likely to disappear. With the increase of sexual freedom and the number of partners, the risk of meeting alpha widows increases, especially if you are a rather calm and non-dominant man, raised only as a nice, that is a weak guest. If you like to eat crumbs, of course, you have the right. I have no intention, especially if the goal is to build a stable family. From a broader perspective, it seems that the state does not want strong men. This is understandable if you do not want the competition to be fully controlled, and happy, unfrustrated, and strong men would be an obvious obstacle. The possibility of leaving is a superpower these days, but as I mentioned, it will require you to embrace yourself, to build real value, which will translate into a sense of value. Together with training, it takes some time, but it's possible. Finally, the last benefit. If you have any doubts about whether the child is yours, you must voluntarily confirm to the civil service that you are the father. Being married, automatic law assumes that the husband is the father. Looking for information about fathers not raising their biological children, I found different estimates. From 10 to 12% to even 30% of children are raised by their not biological fathers. They're investing in not his children, and they don't even know about it. And I remind you, it's very important who our father is. Why? I'll explain in the future in the episode about single mothers. You can do DNA tests to confirm or rule out paternity. The mother usually knows who the father of the child is, unless the party was really crazy. Most of the time, however, he won't let you do the tests. It risks saying that 99% of mothers will get angry when they find out that you just want to be sure of your paternity. In such a situation, the mother will have to file a paternity case, where the tests will be done anyway. It tells you that when you exercise this right, a hurricane attack will be carried out, consisting of ridicule and guilt, on an unprecedented scale. Don't let yourself down because you're not doing anything wrong. If you have doubts, you just want to dispel them and be sure. You have the right to know that you are going to invest in your child. Take care of your business. If you know the rules of the game, you already have the experience and ability to emotionally lead a woman, and you have a high self-esteem, then maybe marriage is for you. Just remember, the legal system treats you as guilty until you prove your innocence. About 90% of those involved in a potential divorce case are women, and now associate it with solidarity for women. To rely on happiness in such an important matter and that it will somehow be, I think, is extreme naivety. Write in the comment what you think. Did you have any inconvenience? Or do you know someone who's been through a divorce? If you like it, please subscribe to my channel, give me a like, and work on yourself.